dapat po munang alamin or matukoy ang pangunahing problema ng bansa upang mapagtuunan ng pansin at mabigyan ng solusyon.
We should have specific goals, do research, and make a policy that is fair for everyone.
Walang problema sa pulisiya. Iayos lang ang pagpapatupad.
Bago patubas ang batas, pag-aralan muna gusto ng government.
Two things, clarity and execution. Both, you need the communication and monitoring. As simple as that.
Mandato ng Philippine Institute for Development Studies o PIDS na gumawa ng mga pag-aaral at pananaliksik ng mga polisiya at programa ng pamahalaan at magbigay ng rekomendasyon sa mga mambabatas sa pagbabalangkas ng mga polisiyang makakatulong sa ating bansa. Sinusulong ng aming ahensya ang evidence-based policy making upang bigyan diin ang kahalagahan ng polisiya na batay sa datos at policy research na sumusuri sa tunay na kalagayan ng ating mga komunidad. Napakahalaga ng policy research, lalo na sa mga panahong dumadaan sa krisis ang ating bansa.
Kapag pulisiya ay pinag-aralan, susulong ang bayan!
In need of references for your research? Do you want a digital library that you can access for free anytime and anywhere? You don't have to look far. SERPI is here for you. SERPI is an online database of socioeconomic materials produced by the Philippine Institute for Development Studies, government agencies, research and academic institutions, and international organizations based in the Philippines. It is the country's first online repository of socioeconomic information, created for policymakers and development practitioners, researchers, educators, and students. To access SERPI, just visit the PIDS website and click the SERPI widget under the Databases tab, or type serp-p.pids.gov.ph. SERPI has a wide variety of materials such as journal articles, books, research papers, working papers, policy notes, audiovisual materials, and more. As of 2022, SERPI has more than 60 partner institutions contributing knowledge resources to the database. SERPI provides a comprehensive coverage of references encompassing 22 research themes: labor and education, gender and development, poverty, technology and innovation, trade and industry, and many more. On the enhanced website of SERPI, you can filter your research by keyword or author, publication type, research theme, or year published, all at the same time. SERPI has more than 7,000 publications and audiovisual materials that you can access and download for free. What are you waiting for? Visit SERPI now. Socioeconomic Research Portal for the Philippines, innovating knowledge exchange and policy research.
So what is PIDS? For over 40 years, the Philippine Institute for Development Studies, or PIDS, has been the country's foremost socio-economic think tank. It conducts rigorous and objective policy research and analyses that help the government in crafting relevant policies, plans, and programs in support of the country's long-term vision and development goals. PIDS pursues its mandate through three basic programs: research, dissemination, and outreach. Through its research program, PIDS identifies and prioritizes studies, develops proposals, and conducts research on priority areas. The results of these studies are then disseminated through different platforms, publications, online resources, PIDS Corner, seminars, and the Development Policy Research Month, or DPRM, held every September. To shed light on key policy issues, the advice and expertise of the Institute's research fellows are also sought by policymakers, government agencies, private sector, and civil society. Since 1977, PIDS has completed numerous policy studies on a wide range of development topics. This brand of service has then translated to policies and programs that have improved the lives of every Filipino. Philippine Institute for Development Studies, service through policy research.
Dapat po munang alamin or matukoy ang pangunahing problema ng bansa upang mapagtuunan ng pansin at mabigyan ng solusyon.
We should have specific goals, do research, and make a policy that is fair for everyone.
Walang problema sa pulisiya. Iayos lang ang pagpapatupad.
Bago patubas ang batas, pag-aralan muna gusto ng government.
Two things, clarity and execution. Both, you need the communication and monitoring. As simple as that.
Mandato ng Philippine Institute for Development Studies o PIDS na gumawa ng mga pag-aaral at pananaliksik ng mga pulisiya at programa ng pamahalaan at magbigay ng rekomendasyon sa mga mambabatas sa pagbabalangkas ng mga pulisiyang makakatulong sa ating bansa. Sinusulong ng aming ahensya ang evidence-based policy making upang bigyan diin ang kahalagahan ng pulisiya na batay sa datos at policy research na sumusuri sa tunay na kalagayan ng ating mga komunidad. Napakahalaga ng policy research, lalo na sa mga panahong dumadaan sa krisis ang ating bansa.
Kapag pulisiya ay pinag-aralan, susulong ang bayan.
In need of references for your research? Do you want a digital library that you can access for free anytime and anywhere? You don't have to look far. SERPI is here for you. SERPI is an online database of socioeconomic materials produced by the Philippine Institute for Development Studies, government agencies, research and academic institutions, and international organizations based in the Philippines. It is the country's first online repository of socioeconomic information, created for policymakers and development practitioners, researchers, educators, and students. To access SERPI, just visit the PIDS website and click the SERPI widget under the Databases tab, or type serp-p.pids.gov.ph. SERPI has a wide variety of materials such as journal articles, books, research papers, working papers, policy notes, audiovisual materials, and more. As of 2022, SERPI has more than 60 partner institutions contributing knowledge resources to the database. SERPI provides a comprehensive coverage of references encompassing 22 research themes: labor and education, gender and development, poverty, technology and innovation, trade and industry, and many more. On the enhanced website of SERPI, you can filter your research by keyword or author, publication type, research theme, or year published, all at the same time. SERPI has more than 7,000 publications and audiovisual materials that you can access and download for free. What are you waiting for? Visit SERPI now. Socioeconomic Research Portal for the Philippines, innovating knowledge exchange and policy research.
So what is PIDS? For over 40 years, the Philippine Institute for Development Studies, or PIDS, has been the country's foremost socioeconomic think tank. It conducts rigorous and objective policy research and analyses that help the government in crafting relevant policies, plans, and programs in support of the country's long-term vision and development goals. PIDS pursues its mandate through three basic programs: research, dissemination, and outreach. Through its research program, PIDS identifies and prioritizes studies, develops proposals, and conducts research on priority areas. The results of these studies are then disseminated through different platforms, publications, online resources, PIDS Corner, seminars, and the Development Policy Research Month, or DPRM, held every September. To shed light on key policy issues, the advice and expertise of the Institute's research fellows are also sought by policymakers, government agencies, private sector, and civil society. Since 1977, PIDS has completed numerous policy studies on a wide range of development topics. This brand of service has then translated to policies and programs that have improved the lives of every Filipino. Philippine Institute for Development Studies, service through policy research.
Welcome to the PIDS webinar series. Before we start our virtual event, we have some reminders. For attendees, your microphone is automatically muted upon entry. If you wish to join the discussion, click the Q&A icon, type your question, and click send. For Facebook viewers, you may send your question using the comment section. Remember to keep your questions concise and direct to the point. We will screen all questions to ensure that they are relevant to the webinar topic and the presentation. The moderator will read the questions during the open forum and cover as many as possible depending on the available time. This webinar is being recorded and live streamed on the PIDS and SERPI Facebook pages. The recording will also be made publicly available on the PIDS YouTube channel. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to your active participation.
Good morning, and welcome to the second PIDS webinar this year, Charting a Path to Quality Education in the Philippines by 2030. We are very excited to see many participants joining us today via Zoom and Facebook Live. I am Sonny Domingo, and I will be your host and moderator for today's event. Throughout the webinar, we'll be diving into crucial topics surrounding education in the Philippines, exploring strategies, challenges, and potential solutions to ensure quality education for all by the year 2030. We have a lineup of distinguished speakers and experts who will share their insights and experiences in the field. Before we begin, I'd like to remind our participants to actively engage in today's discussions. Feel free to ask questions, share your thoughts and insights, and interact with our panelists. You can use the Q&A box here on Zoom or comment on Facebook Live. Without further ado, let us welcome the PIDS President, Dr. Aniceto Orbeta Jr., to give us the opening remarks. Dr. Orbeta?
Thank you, Sonny. Good morning to all participants here on Zoom and those watching via PIDS and SERPI Facebook pages. We welcome to our webinar titled Charting a Path to Quality Education in the Philippines by 2030. Before we start, I would like to greet the esteemed officials present today. Office of Representative Manuel F. Alba, Chief of Staff Marikit Chirimilgar, Technical Education and Skills Development Authority Ilocos Sur Provincial Office Director Larry Dison, Counselor for Higher Education International Quality Group Chair Chita Pijano, Ateneo School of Government Dean Philip Tuanyo, UP Center for Women's Studies Foundation Incorporated Board Member Maria Helen Dayo, Batanes State College President Jovi Durante, Esquilab's co-founder Angela Chin Dilantar, Philippine Exporters Confederation Incorporated Vice President Maria Fordelisa Leong, Education Research and Development Assistance Foundation Executive Director Dolora Cardenio, Asia Society Philippines Executive Director Marco Sardillo. I would also like to greet the various representatives from government, academia, private sector, civil society, and media virtually present today. The United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, or SDG, offer a pathway towards a sustainable and prosperous future for all. According to the SDG Report 2023, the Philippines has an SDG Index score of 67.1, ranking 98 out of the 166 member countries. This represents an improvement compared to the score of 66.6 in 2022. But despite progress in certain areas, the Philippines still has a long way to go, particularly with setbacks noted in specific goals such as SDG 4 or quality education. We all know a well-educated society is crucial in tackling the social, environmental, and governance challenges facing the modern world. In 2022, distinguished visiting research fellow Dr. Vicente Pacquiao and I published a discussion paper, Philippine Education, Situational Challenges and Ways Forward, highlighting the low overall quality of the education system despite producing competitive graduates and very high enrollment rates. The pandemic further exacerbated existing problems. In a recent Senate hearing, the Committee on Basic Education discussed the results of the 2022 Program for International Student Assessment, or PISA. The assessment revealed a 5 to 6 year learning competency lag among our students, with the Philippines ranking 77th out of 81 participating countries and scoring 120 points below the average in math, reading, and science. Furthermore, it highlights that 75% of our 15-year-old students have below minimum competencies for their grade level. Closing the gap and guaranteeing access to high-quality education requires investing more in education, starting education early, prioritizing innovative teaching methods, utilizing technology appropriately, fostering positive learning environments, and home sport, among others. By taking on these challenges head-on, we can equip our students with knowledge and skills needed to thrive in an increasingly competitive world. Today's webinar features the PIDS study titled Sustainable Development Goal 4 on Quality Education for All. How does the Philippines fare and what needs to be done? Authored by PIDS Senior Research Fellow Jose Ramon Albert, Research Analyst Micah Munoz, former PIDS staff Jana Flor Bismanos and Angelo Hernandez, former Philippine Business for Education Executive Director Lavlane Basaliote, De La Salle University School of Economics Associate Dean Jason Alensoren, and the study explores the Philippines' progress and towards achieving SDG4 and lifelong learning opportunities. Joining us to provide valuable insights is the Second Congressional Commission on Education, or EDCOM 2 Chief Technical Specialist Kropskaya Adenuevo, and Department of Education Bureau of Curriculum Development Director Samuel Sullivan. Let us enjoy listening to the presentation this morning. I eagerly anticipate your active participation in our discussions. Thank you, and I now give back the floor to our moderator, Sonny.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Orbeta. So before we proceed to the main presentations, as traditionally done in the PIDS webinar series, we have a poll question flashed on the screen. Let me read it. What factors do you consider most important for improving education quality in the country? Order the factors from most important to least important. So from most important to least important. Number 1, adequate funding and resources. Number 2, quality of teaching and educators. Number 3, curriculum reform and innovation. Number 4, access to educational technology. And number 5, parent and community involvement. So 5 factors, rank them from most important to least important. For those joining via Zoom, kindly click the link provided on the chat box. For those joining via Facebook Live, kindly click the provided link in the comments section. So again, the question is, what factors do you consider most important for improving education quality in the country? Order the factors from most important to least important. Number 1, adequate funding and resources. Number 2, quality of teaching and educators. And number 3, curriculum reform and innovation. Number 4, access to educational technology. And number 5, parent and community involvement. So we'll give you a few seconds to answer and respond. Okay. So right now we have about 255 attendees in Zoom and much more joining us via Facebook Live. So the results are as follows. Most of you look at quality of teaching and educators as most important. Second is the adequate funding and resources given to our educational system and schools. Third, curriculum reform and innovation. Fourth, access to educational technology. And fifth, parent and community involvement. So, well, this is the sentiment of the group that we have here right now. Although some probably would look at the different options differently. Okay, anyway, we'll delve into more details on this given the presentations later. So without further delay, let's begin our session. Today's webinar features the study Sustainable Development Goal 4 on quality education for all. How does the Philippines fare and what needs to be done? Authored by PIDS Senior Research Fellow Jose Ramon Albert, Research Analyst Micah Munoz, former PIDS staff Jana Flor Bismanos and Angelo Hernandez. Former Philippine Business for Education Executive Director Lavlane Basiliote, and De La Salle University School of Economics Associate Dean Jason Alinsunurin. The study provided a detailed examination of the progress of the Philippines in achieving Sustainable Development Goal number 4, or SDG4, on quality education and lifelong learning opportunities for all. Set the stage by outlining the Philippine educational policy landscape, including its legal and institutional frameworks. The study's comprehensive review offered valuable insights and practical recommendations for stakeholders to ensure the Philippines fulfills its commitment to quality education for all by 2030. You may download a copy of the study using the link that we have provided in the chat box. So let's now have our presentations. We are very thrilled to have three authors of the study joining us today. First, we have Dr. Jose Ramon Albert, or Toots. He is a professional statistician and a senior research fellow at PIDS. He earned a BS in Applied Math, summa cum laude from De La Salle University in 1988, an MS in statistics in 1989, and a PhD in the same in 1993 from the State University of New York at Stony Brook. From September 2012 to February 2014, he led the National Statistical Coordination Board as Secretary General before it was merged into the Philippine Statistics Authority. Dr. Albert has consulted for various Philippine government agencies, private firms, and international organizations. Over 2 decades, he has worked in 25 countries across different regions on poverty diagnostics, econometrics, and survey analysis. He has also taught at various higher education institutions in the Philippines and has written on education, poverty, social issues, and development. Joining him is co-author Ms. Love Basiliote, who is the founder of Alab Partners and is an independent policy consultant. She also sits on the Basic Education Board Advisory Committee of the Ateneo de Manila University. She served as Philippine Business for Education Executive Director from 2012 to 2022. Also joining us is Dr. Jason Alinsunurin, who is currently the Associate Dean of De La Salle University School of Economics in Manila. He holds a PhD from the University of Bologna, in an MA from Ateneo de Manila University, and a BS from the University of the Philippines. He was also a visiting scholar at the Public Governance Institute of KU Leuven. Before academia, he held consulting appointments with the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank. His research interests are in the areas of economics, of education, skills formation, and employment policies. We are privileged to have you here today. Dr. Albert, you may take the virtual floor.
Thank you, Sonny. Good morning. On behalf of our research team, allow me to start discussions on our assessment of the country's performance in goal number 4 of the Sustainable Development Goals that tries to work on ensuring inclusive and equitable quality education for all. Love Basiliote and Dr. Jason Alinsunurin will later delve into specifics on technical vocational education and higher education respectively. The presentation is organized as follows. I will start by introducing what is SDG 4. And I will outline the study objectives and key policy questions, describe the research methodology. Then I, Love, and Jason will present key findings, assessing the Philippines' progress on SDG 4. Lastly, we will offer some recommendations that hopefully will be important for the EDCOM 2, DepEd, TESDA, and CHED to consider. At the end of the Millennium Development Goals period in 2015, the world adopted the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, with a 2030 deadline. SDG 4 specifically aims for inclusive, equitable, quality education, and lifelong learning opportunities for all. The Philippines has long recognized the importance of education in socioeconomic development, as evidenced by various policy documents, and the Philippine Constitution itself mandates free public education at primary and secondary levels. Beyond its policy declarations, the Philippine Development Plan justifies economic investments based on the long-term aspirations of Filipinos for high educational attainment, as well as the increasing need in the labor market for a more educated labor force. The Constitution mandates the state to prioritize education in budget allocation. In 2021, the education sector received 751.7 billion pesos, which is 16.7% of the total government budget, with DepEd receiving 605.74 billion pesos. From 2010 to 2020, the DepEd budget has more than tripled in nominal levels because of the need to implement K-12, particularly to build more classrooms and hire additional teachers to deliver the 3 extra grade levels, kindergarten, and 2 years of senior high school. Despite these increased budgets, education spending still has not reached 4% of GDP, lagging behind many of our ASEAN neighbors. Our study examines data relevant to SDG 4 and other related education indicators to inform discussions in EDCOM 2 and in government agencies in charge of the sector. It aims to provide specific recommendations for implementation, monitoring, evaluation, and governance across the entire education sector to ensure that no Filipino student is left behind. Our assessment involves reviewing literature and analyzing various data sources, including the Philippine Statistics Authority's SDG database and the UN Statistics Division's Global SDG database, labor force survey data, PISA results, and DepEd administrative data. Despite managing to attain universal primary education during the MDG period and achieving widespread access to basic education, providing quality basic education in the country remains a key challenge. Less than a fifth of students achieve minimum proficiency in reading and mathematics. The recent dismal PISA results, aside from the results in 2018, underscore that the education sector is in crisis and in dire need of significant reforms. Learning poverty rates in Cambodia, Myanmar, Laos, and the Philippines remain substantial at around 90% or more. In contrast, Singapore has a low rate of only 3%, while Vietnam and Thailand are at 20 to 25%. Pre-pandemic National Achievement Test or NAT results administered to grade 6 and grade 10 students show that K-12 implementation has not yet delivered substantial improvements in quality as was originally designed. Average proficiency levels were at best nearly proficient as of 2017. In other words, students were just correctly answering around 4 out of 10 questions, and they were least proficient in math and science. While math and science performance improved in 2021 to 2022 for grade 6, scores in Filipino fell. Sex disaggregated data across the years suggests that girls outperform boys across subject areas. For grade 12, performance has remained low proficiency, with worst scores again seen in math and science. When disaggregating data by sex, the MPS scores are generally higher again for girls than for boys, and in the few areas where boys outperformed girls, the differences were very minimal. The lower secondary education completion rate increased from 71% in 2008 to 81% in 2018, 10 percentage points for a 10-year period, reflecting some progress in keeping children in school. However, the pandemic has reversed these gains. Girls' completion and cohort survival rates also are much higher than those of boys. Beyond completion rates, we must address learning losses. Findings from the Asian Development Bank show that the pandemic has caused 1.42 years of learning losses. In other words, 20.6% compared to pre-pandemic levels, which may result in 3.7% earnings losses. The 28 PISA assessment shows a positive correlation between education spending per student and learning outcomes. Despite increases in budgets, the Philippines remains among the lowest globally in terms of spending per student. Annual spending per K-12 student tripled in nominal terms from 8,000 in school year 2009-2010 to over 22,000 in school year 2016 to 2018, but declined to below 21,000 in 2020 to 2021. While more budgets may be warranted, high-quality education necessitates adequate financing to support well-qualified teachers, conducive environments, robust assessments, and innovative technologies. However, increased budgets alone cannot guarantee better outcomes if they are not allocated strategically. Pre-primary education participation rates have seen progress but were likely hampered again by the pandemic. Recent 2021 data from the merged FIES-LFS file of the PSA, however, that were not cited in this study but that I have managed to produce from the microdata just a few days ago, suggests a concerning decline in the participation rate for 5-year-olds. This again is likely an effect of the pandemic. Moving to SDG targets 4.3 and 4.4, I will pass the floor to Love and Jason to discuss TechVoc and higher education respectively.
Thanks, Dr. Albert. Thanks, Dr. Toots. Good morning, everybody. Let me now present the relevant TVET data in relation to SDG 4. Before I do that, let me preface the data slides with some key messages on TVET. While it is important to have international standards and definitions of TVET outcomes, as they could lead to more resources and political support for TVET, these indicators are just the minimum. We need to set custom indicators that reflect the Philippines' level of development and what Buzimeyer and Iverson call institutional context. In other words, we need to describe where we want to go given where we currently are. Secondly, the current state of the labor market necessitates a strong skill strategy if we want to benefit from the demographic dividends of our youth population. Thirdly, in terms of TVET access, we are lagging our neighbors. Female enrollment also lags that of males. Fourth, outcomes data have remained largely flat. Measurement of efficiency and productivity has been difficult due to gaps in the system's capacity. And fifth, the TVET sector, as one of the key development strategies outlined in the PDP, has historically been underfunded. New funding sources and good governance initiatives must therefore be considered as TESTA and the EDCOM 2 develop a strong and resilient skill strategy for the country. Now, while the Philippines has posted continuous GDP growth, notwithstanding the COVID years, of course, this growth has not been accompanied by job growth. The decreasing unemployment rate has largely been explained by a significant number of people of working age enrolling in K-12. What's worrying is the decreasing labor participation rate, with females lagging their male peers, despite on average having a higher educational attainment. Unemployment and underemployment are a youth, women, and rural problem. Majority of the employed are in the informal sector, with an increasing number of those in the formal economy engaged in precarious jobs, meaning these jobs usually not have contracts, and they can be fired at any time. Signs showing a shift to low productivity jobs poses a threat to a sector already grappling with risks associated with the fourth industrial revolution, conflicts, and climate change. Now, various documents articulate where we want to go as a country and what we want to achieve when it comes to TVET. The challenge now is connecting these objectives to ensure a coherent connection between shared economic prosperity, job creation, and skills development. Now, let me go into the specifics of our progress towards standard SDG indicators. Again, these are minimum standards, and we can definitely aim for higher levels of achievement. Most of the charts presented here are based on the data reported to the UNESCO Institute of Statistics, unless otherwise stated. When it comes to gross enrollment ratio for tertiary education, we registered the lowest proportion among our ASEAN 5 neighbors. In other words, fewer Filipinos age eligible to enroll in tertiary education than most ASEAN 5 age-eligible citizens enroll in tertiary education. Worryingly, this number has remained relatively flat despite policies to improve tertiary education access, like the Universal Access to Quality Tertiary Education Act of 2017. When it comes to gender, males are being left behind their female counterparts in tertiary education enrollment. We can surmise that this is probably a knock-on effect of higher dropout rates of boys than girls starting junior high school. The Philippines' proportion of 15 to 24-year-olds enrolled in vocational education is once again lower than the regional average. But unlike tertiary education in general, females have lagged in technical vocational education enrollment from 2014 to 2021. Analyzing TESDA's annual reports in the past 5 years, we are seeing an uptick in completion rates in TVET. However, when it comes to certification rates, these have remained flat in the past 5 years. Note that when we talk about completion and certification rates, we are talking about two samples or universes of trainees, given that not all training programs have training regulations, assessments, and assessors. Despite the limited resources, with TESDA's budget only accounting for about 2% of the education budget, there are funding mechanisms that target disadvantaged populations, showing moves towards equity in access. A TESDA scholar in 2021 could get between an average of 15,351 pesos for STEP and 37,384 and 97 pesos centavos under the UAQTEA, or the Unified Access to Quality Tertiary Education Act. Now, how this increase in per capita funding for higher technical education impacts internal and external system efficiencies remain to be seen. And we can see that more and targeted support could lead to better TVET outcomes. Looking into factors that could explain these TVET outcomes should be high on our agenda. Another set of factors we need to look at is the system's capacity as measured by the number of TVET trainees trained. Judging from the trainee-trainer ratio, we don't have enough trainers. Based on TESDA's 2022 annual report, we also lack assessors and assessment centers. Program registration is also running behind the demand for certain TESDA programs. in an evaluation conducted by the OECD of the skill strategies of ASEAN countries and select OECD countries, the Philippines is particularly weak in developing relevant skills. This is largely due to low participation in tertiary education, including TVET, and putting these skills to effective use, as evidenced by our high need rates and low labor force participation. Before I pass it on to Jason, before I pass it on to Jason, let me end on a brighter note. It's not like we do not know what to do and whether we're not really doing anything well. We know that enterprise-based training tends to lead to better employment outcomes as measured by high employability rates and sustained productivity. We also have a good TVET governance system that encourages industry participation. It is now just a matter of leveraging these knowledge and institutional contexts to improve our progress towards the SDGs and our own development goals. Now turning over to Jason for his inputs on equal access to higher education.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Dr. Tutsenlov, for sharing the findings about the basic education and TVET outcomes in the Philippines. So this morning, I'd like to extend our discussion and share some of our insights on the critical trends of higher education outcomes. So before I proceed, I'd like to mention that the SDG education targets do not necessarily have a narrow set of outcomes specific to the higher education sector. In fact, they are grouped with TVET. However, there are 3 targets which we think are relevant for the higher education sector, broadly referring to post-secondary education targets and referring to some, interestingly, to higher education outcomes. So these dimensions indicate 1, for example, increasing the quantity of youth and adults who have relevant skills for decent jobs. Number 2, reducing inequities in education access to reduce disparities in the adverse labor market, particularly for those in the marginalized and vulnerable groups. And finally, regarding the supply of qualified teachers. So in general, our study offers 3 main findings which dwell on the issues above. So for our analysis, we have used the labor force survey from 2019 to 2021. So it's possible to extend the analysis to earlier years or to the more recent years. So next slide, please. Our first key message relates to the current challenge of the Philippines to exploit its demographic dividend. So we are finding stark disparities in access to post-secondary education. So the slide shows the dominance of workers with incomplete high school education in the labor market. Practically half of our workers do not have incomplete high school education. Although we have made progress in increasing the proportion of workers with complete high school and tertiary education, they have remained relatively constant since 2019. An essential question to ask, what does it mean? Workers with incomplete basic education would naturally self-select into low-skilled, low-productivity, and low-earning jobs. As the workers mature, they would find themselves with or whatever skills and livelihoods they have to be quite vulnerable to labor market challenges. Next slide, please. So we're seeing that the phenomenon is already quite showing signs among the older population. We see the younger population taking more considerable social and economic burdens for their families. More than 40% of the population 46 years old and above have incomplete high school, which thus acts as a barrier for many middle-aged individuals to participate productively. Next slide, please. In this interesting slide on the share of workers, we get to see the share of our workers with college degrees. Nationally, the average has been around 20%. In fact, it has breached around 22% quite recently. It is not surprising that practically most of our younger workers have college degrees at almost half. Also, it's not surprising that the share of the college degree holders shrank during the pandemic and that the share has increased recently. What we are seeing here is the share of the older workers who have fewer college degrees as compared to the younger population. In many cases, most of the younger workers have more up-to-date training and updated skill sets relevant to growing or frontier industries in the economy. So mid-career or mid-level workers looking to change careers or industries may find themselves to be looking for opportunities relevant for their career growth. Next slide, please. Stark disparities are also quite persistent regarding the labor market outcomes of our senior high school graduates. And there are 2 charts here on the educational attainment by group, particularly for those who are 21 to 25 years old. What we are seeing is that more senior high school graduates are entering the labor force, but those who did not complete senior high school are also doing the same. The pressure to earn during times of crisis, particularly during the pandemic period, is highly pronounced during these times. We are also saw that the pandemic rushed the entry of the junior high school graduates with relatively high participation rates of non-completers. So the early 2020s are showing that higher labor force participation rate of senior high school graduates, particularly those who will not proceed to higher education due to a variety of factors. Next slide, please. Another insight which we think is quite worrying, and I believe that we should be paying attention, is that we are seeing that men are substantially behind women in college, junior high school, and senior high school completion rates. It's quite reflective of our progress in terms of education quality in the basic education sector. So these findings will severely, this result will severely affect their skills, job, and marriage market prospects. And the non-completion rates among junior high school are also higher among men. So next slide, please. The next slide shows requires strong public attention for actionable policies on why job quality matters. A worrying trend is emerging. Despite higher college participation outcomes among younger people, they don't necessarily go into professional jobs. We are finding that an increasing share of the youth are going to the middle-skilled and low-skilled occupations, which corroborates our earlier statement about our inability to harness our demographic dividend towards higher productivity gains. So what we are seeing here is that the rise of younger workers going into service jobs and also low-skilled jobs. So we're also seeing that there's an occupational category which, if we're going to look at the outcomes among those who have college degrees and those who were not able to complete college degrees, college degree holders, we're seeing that there's a declining share of professional jobs. A lot of the younger people are going into service and clerical work. We are also finding that in specific job categories such as security guards, drivers, machine operators, and maids, helpers have a significant share of college degrees, implying that skill sets expected of some college degrees are not translating into productive skills in the labor market. Next slide, please. The incomplete college degree holders, we're also seeing a substantial decline in the share of professional jobs, the domination of low-skilled and service jobs, and the rising share of machine operators. So what could potentially explain this? We could have labor supply views and labor demand views. It's either the Philippine industries are not getting sophisticated enough or not getting enough investments to hire highly educated workers. So overall, these are the three main issues we're able to find so far for the higher education outcomes. We're now passing the floor to Dr. Toots.
Thank you, Love and Jason. SDG Target 4.5 aims to eliminate gender disparities in education. I mentioned earlier, and so with Jason, that we do have parity favoring girls in education. The labor market, however, has not fully utilized the advancements in education of the female population. The predominance of female teachers is an exception. It, however, might contribute to disparities in school participation and achievement among boys. While this gender imbalance may hypothetically contribute to such disparities, the literature, however, on the link between teacher gender and student performance is mixed, with some studies suggesting no significant impact. The 2019 Functional Literacy, Education, and Mass Media, or FLEMS, data show that we have high basic and functional literacy rates among Filipinos, especially among those aged 10 to 64, with some variations by sex and region. For children aged 10 to 17 in particular, basic literacy ranges from around 80% in BARM to 99% in NCR. Similar to basic literacy, functional literacy rates for girls exceed boys in all regions, with BARM having the lowest at 76.5%, and Northern Mindanao the highest, 95%. Literacy rate ties to socioeconomic status. Children aged 10 to 17 with access to safe sanitation and water services have higher functional literacy. However, given shifts towards digital literacy, we may need to reevaluate the accuracy of these metrics. SDG indicator 4.4.1 particularly measures the proportion of youths and adults with ICT skills. And on this measure, the Philippines lags behind ASEAN countries across nearly all ITU-endorsed digital literacy skills. Differences also exist between males and females when considering age and sex together. SDG target 4.4 focuses on adequate infrastructure and inclusive environments in schools. Facilities have improved in recent years, partly justified by the K-12 rollout. As of 2020, electricity access reached almost all schools, while in 3 out of 4 primary and 4 out of 5 secondary schools, we have had computer access. Internet access was around 70% in both primary and secondary schools. The proportion of schools with basic drinking water access has increased from around half in 2017 to currently slightly higher. The proportion of primary schools with access to basic single-sex sanitation was 60% in 2018, up by 15 percentage points over the preceding 2 years. However, less than 20% of schools have adapted infrastructure and materials for students with disabilities, suggesting inclusive education remains a distant reality. Official scholarship flows into the Philippines average around $20 million in 2018 constant prices, from 2006 to 2020, peaking unusually high at $90 million in 2018. While scholarships are important, donor countries should increase other forms of educational support to developing countries like the Philippines, structuring them to build institutional capability. And in line with SDG 4, scholarships should transparently target disadvantaged youth to advance equity, inclusion, and quality. Recognizing teachers as the most vital asset, nearly 70% of the DepEd's 2010 to 2019 budget comprised teachers' salaries and benefits. Despite misconceptions, teachers are not underpaid. They're actually earning double the median wage in the Philippines. However, their pay serves largely for compensation for heavy workloads, spanning teaching, administrative duties, student support roles, disaster response, health initiatives, etc. Rather than higher pay, increased focus and support for teachers to devote time to facilitate learning is needed. With quality teaching central to learning, teachers require empowerment, sufficient recruitment, and capabilities building, particularly in marginalized areas. Overall, while we have had moderate improvements on some SDG indicators, these remain insufficient to achieve the many SDG 4 targets. Data actually show that the entire sector has been in crisis. Policymakers across DepEd, TESDA, CHED, and EDCOM must realize optimizing impact per budgetary peso as being pivotal. While more resources are warranted, even doubling or tripling investments without specifying actions where they will go towards boosting learning would actually prove futile. The foremost step is pinpointing the root causes of our learning deficits, whether stemming from the curriculum, language of instruction, mass promotion, the teacher factor, or other factors. Global studies have, however, shown that teachers have a vital role in ensuring quality education. Secondly, the governance paradigm of the education sector must shift to effectively harness data for outcomes. In contrast to over a decade ago, DepEd no longer publicly releases key indicators soon after school opening. While DepEd staff respond to data requests, an open data policy involving readily disseminating data on key indicators on the DepEd website could expedite dissemination processes. Anonymized student-level data should also be publicly accessible to enable research and learning regarding learning outcome determinants. Linking datasets like the NAT with BEIS and using standard identifiers such as the learner's reference numbers and the national ID could inform assessments on social protection initiatives for marginalized student outcomes. Lastly, increased budget allocations must focus on improving spending quality and demonstrating outcomes achieved per peso invested. As the largest budget component in improving teacher recruitment, training, support, and management is critical. Our previous studies pointed out the need to address heavy teacher workloads to improve teaching quality. Utilizing the NAT results to shape training programs can also enhance learning outcomes. In a 2021 paper, Jason analyzed data from the 2018 PISA assessment to understand how student backgrounds, attitudes towards learning, reading abilities, and other student-reported information in the Philippines relate to PISA performance. Based on these findings, he recommended enhancing the curriculum and boosting teacher training accordingly. DepEd should examine also its human resources shortfall systematically, considering teachers' time use constraints, working with DBM to hire more administrative staff and guidance counselors could unload non-teaching duties, enabling teachers to focus on their main responsibility to facilitate learning. Public schools can also tap undergraduate education students to assist in non-teaching tasks. Good quality education practices from Germany, Korea, Vietnam, Poland, and Estonia could inform local policy adaptations and research. DepEd collaboration with PSA and the DICT is also vital to strengthen our literacy measurements. While indicative of progress, current metrics fall short of aligning with digital skills assessments, and there might be possible prestige biases. Advancing targets around gender equality, inclusiveness for disabilities, and social inclusion of disadvantaged groups are also required for equal, accessible learning opportunities, enabling individuals to thrive amidst deepening societal interconnectedness and digital transformation. Now over to Love and Jason for TechVoc and higher education recommendations.
So as I mentioned, thank you, Dr. Toots. As I mentioned, we need to leverage what we know and our system strengths to improve our progress towards the SDGs. I have preliminarily identified 5 ways forward for TVET that is guided by the OECD's Strong Skill Strategy framework. First, when it comes to skills development, we need to operationalize the Philippine qualifications framework so that we reinforce learning of 21st century skills in senior high school and encourage mobility or transition to higher levels of education. Second, in my experience in PIDS before, on top of the actual training costs, wraparound costs like transportation, childcare, insurance, mentoring are also strong determinants of persistence in TVET, meaning they stay longer in the program and they actually complete. So scholarship programs need to account for those and not just for tuition fees. Thirdly, we need to beef up capacity. Existing mechanisms like the UniFast and the Unified Access to Quality Tertiary Education could be used to upskill existing TESDA trainers and make TVET more attractive. Working with the private sector from program development, assessment, and certification is also another way of beefing up our capacity of the TVET system. Fourth, interventions could be more targeted if we had a registry of youth need and potential TVET clientele. In TESDA's estimates, there are about 35 million people who could benefit from TVET. I suspect there's actually more, especially given our findings in terms of enrollment or access to tertiary education. But we need to know who they are, where they are, to ensure that our interventions can be more strategic given our limited resources. And lastly, which leads me, and this is my fifth recommendation, we need to increase overall funding. Perhaps it's time to maximize TVET devolution and to explore private sector incentives like that of Malaysia's Human Resources Development Fund. The Private Sector Advisory Council that reports to the President has recently incorporated the P Corp, which could be our answer to increased public-private partnerships in funding a resilient and sustainable skills strategy. Now over to Jason for his recommendations on tertiary education.
Thank you, Love. So I have a couple of recommendations here based on the research findings that we have discussed earlier. So the first one has to do with the creation of the labor market information system that specifically informs higher education stakeholders about the skills and job needs of the economy, which are localized to the regions and the provinces. Acknowledging the different factor endowments in provinces or regions in the Philippines, this would be quite important for the higher education sector to formulate programs that would they would offer programs which would cater to the needs of their localities. The second one is to implement targeted programs like scholarships and financial aid to enhance access to post-secondary education for vulnerable groups, particularly for those who we find that we're not able to have equitable access to opportunities. The third one is to strengthen lifelong and learning upskilling opportunities, ensuring alignment with future job requirements and the external validation of assessments. And this would apply particularly for the teacher training in the Philippines. The fourth one is to develop a policy research agenda for measuring and reporting higher education outcomes, particularly at the level of Commission of Higher Education. We need to have timely information and statistics about in terms of the performance of our higher education sector beyond just the universities and the colleges, and how are graduates able to find jobs and how long does it take for them to find jobs and whether these jobs are relevant for their skill sets. So this would include the design of completion reskilling programs, and we also encourage the private sector involvement in the curriculum and training development. So in other words, we would like to share the kind of let's say programs that we develop are along the needs of the private sector, because eventually this is how the economy is going to progress. Lastly, I think it's quite important for local government units and higher education institutions to have a strong traction, or for them to share information on the priority jobs and sectors through data analysis, and aside from just leveraging data sources like LFS. So it's quite important for the education sector and the government to work together to identify the sectors which are considered to be growth or frontier industries in their regions. So I think that's it for the higher education sector. So that's the last slide. So I think, thank you very much, Dr. Toots.
Yes, thank you, Jason, and thank you, Love. We're turning the floor back to Sonny.
Thank you very much, Toots, Jason, and Love, for those very interesting and excellent presentations. If I get you correctly, we have a few positive and some worrying indicators that were presented. It's good that DepEd increased its budget, tripled the budget during the past decade, but still, globally, we are low in spending. During the pandemic, we were impacted so much in terms of learning losses. We are lagging behind the ASEAN 5 neighbors that we have in terms of a lot of those educational indicators. The TVET sector is underfunded. And another worrying item is that the youth are going for low and middle skill jobs. So that's probably less of an incentive for them to go to college. What's good is that we have very high basic and functional literacy. Basic literacy around 97%, functional at around 89%. But you have also flagged that inclusive education is far from being a reality in the Philippines. So that's something to work on, not only in the near future, but probably in terms of long-term strategic planning and execution. So I guess we'll be talking more about the results of your study during the Q&A. We'll now go to our discussants for their insights. First, we have Ms. Kupskaya Anyanuevo, the Chief Technical Specialist of the Second Congressional Commission on Education, or EDCOM 2. She has worked in the education sector by teaching, doing research, and managing programs for the past 2 decades. She has also been in charge of teacher training, the development of teaching learning materials, and direction setting in various EAT programs. Her research has been on inclusive education and financing, teacher development, ALS, and impact evaluation programs. She holds a bachelor's degree in psychology from UP. She graduated magna cum laude and was awarded the most outstanding student in the social sciences. She has an MA in educational differential psychology at Ludwig Maximilians University in Munich. Ladies and gentlemen, let's have Ms. Kay Medel Anyanuevo. The virtual floor is yours. Kay.
Thank you very much, Sonny. Let me share my presentation. So good morning, everyone. I'm Kay Anyanuevo, and I'm from EDCOM 2. And first of all, I'd like to thank PIDS for inviting EDCOM 2, and of course, congratulate the authors for putting together all of the SDG 4 targets and charting the progress of the country towards these targets. So I will react to the report by, first of all, relating it to the EDCOM 2 Year 1 report. So some of your recommendations are actually related to the findings that we cited in the Year 1 report. And then secondly, I will also talk about data and data governance and the use of evidence, because I think creating a culture where data and use of evidence is present is very important to be able to address not just SDG monitoring, SDG 4 monitoring, but actually moving towards quality education. So first, let's relate the recommendations to the EDCOM 2 Year 1 report. So as you know, EDCOM 2's mandate is really to comprehensively assess the education sector. And we have to share our findings, our recommendations to Congress. And we actually officially released our Year 1 report a month ago. This report is based on studying 12 out of our 28 priority areas, doing 19 hearings, doing 12 focus group discussions, and 23 site visits.
Kay,
yes.
May I interrupt?
Yes.
Can you please show your presentation in full screen?
Oh, okay.
Slideshow.
Yes. There you go. Yes, there you go.
Thank you.
Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. So I will first address the recommendation on teacher workload. So on addressing teacher workload, we found that teachers continue to bear the burden of about 50 administrative and ancillary tasks, despite efforts to allow them to focus on teaching. And here on the slide, you actually find a listing of some of the ancillary tasks of teachers. So while administrative officers have actually been hired, 5,000 per year starting 2020, the impact of this remains limited. In addition, existing standards for school administrative support staff developed needs to be reviewed and updated. Actually, the staffing standards for schools, they're based on a 1997 document. So they definitely need to be updated, and they need to adequately account for school needs, especially at the elementary level. So we have a sampling here of the allocation per school. Interestingly, staffing standards have not been followed, resulting in uneven allocation of support staff for schools of the same size and typology. You can see on the slide, for example, we have Batasan Hills with 566 teaching staff and only 4 support staff, whereas Leyte National High School has 253 teaching personnel and 32 support staff. So we can see that there is a variation, not just in the number, but in the actual positions given to schools. So this suggests the absence of a strategic workforce planning in DepEd's creation and deployment of school staff support positions. So definitely additional resources are needed to effectively implement DepEd's directive to remove non-teaching tasks from teacher workload. That's in DO2 series of 2024. So DepEd mentioned deploying non-teaching personnel to clusters of schools and hiring through contract of service or job order charge against MOE. But we know that that the MOE and the alternative sources of funding are actually not enough to provide the necessary support staff. And so the good news is we had a meeting. This was last February 8th. And actually now a technical group is being created to address all of these staffing concerns. The TWG will be composed of high-level representatives from DepEd, DBM, CSC, LBRMO, EDCOM 2, and even commissioners' offices, including the Appropriations Committee, and will work on making sure that DepEd is able to provide the necessary resources to ensure that teachers are actually able to teach in the classrooms and not doing additional tasks. Now, I will be talking about TVET and lifelong learning. So on strengthening lifelong learning and upskilling, and this is something that Love mentioned, we actually focused on looking at enterprise-based training. And in year 1, we found that despite its efficacy in providing skills and guaranteeing superior labor market outcomes for graduates, EBT remains the least popular modality in TVET. So this is based on TESTA data. It remains to be as I mentioned, least popular modality, accounting only for 9% of enrollment. So despite it being effective, despite knowing that it can lead to superior labor market outcomes, it's not very popular. So we're trying to find out why is that the case. So based on EDCOM 2 consultations, the most acute challenges are the following: engagement of industry in the development and implementation of responsive competency standards and training programs, the rationalization of guidelines on EBT, and the lack of incentives for enterprises. Just last week, we had a meeting, a consultation, and we are really trying to find out why there is a lack of understanding of the guidelines on EBT, and what really are the incentives for enterprises to engage in EBT. We also wanted to pose the following questions to the authors because they mentioned Poland's continuous improvement efforts, Vietnam's high-tech, high-touch model, and Estonia's excellence model. Are there specific aspects of these models that the authors would recommend us to look into, given the SHS TVET interface? So maybe there are more specific aspects that they would like to share with us, so we can look at them and study them and mention them maybe in the year 2 report. And finally, I would like to discuss some aspects of governance and finance. This was also mentioned in the recommendations of the report. In terms of integrated planning of DepEd, SHED, and TESDA, we found that there are actually 68 interagency bodies that have been established to enable coordination on a broad range of concerns. However, there is no high-level coordinating body to really effectively coordinate the planning among the agencies. If you look at this slide, and this is not a complete listing, but some of them are really necessary. For example, the Philippine Qualifications Framework, the National Coordinating Council, yes, definitely the presence of these 3 agencies are required. But how about the Dangerous Drugs Board or the one on antimicrobial resistance? Are those really necessary interagency mechanisms? So actually, PIDS and EDCOM 2 are working on a research to be able to really effectively identify that high-level mechanism. What exactly should that look like? And how often that body should meet, all of those details. So the bottom line is there are misalignments in the education sector. The systems, accountability frameworks employed to monitor and oversee performance at the system, agency, and individual levels really are not aligned, and they do not act as a system. The sector is actually not a unified whole. The sector instead is composed of various agencies and groups acting unmindfully of their links to other offices, bureaus, or agencies. And these are some more examples. So it's not just DepEd, SHED, and TESDA. It's also, for example, for teacher education, we have DepEd, SHED, and the PRC. Then we also have ECC, the national agencies involved in ECCD Council and the Teacher Education Council, and so on. So you see, we have all of these alignments across the entire education sector. In our year 1 report, we emphasize that we have not invested in the workforce needed for our education system to function properly, and that there is actually a lack of oversight and a lack of feedback loops. And related to investments and feedback loops, I wanted to end this presentation by focusing on data and data governance, because this is the availability of data is really one challenge that EDCOM 2 faced in our last year. And actually, we continue to face that currently. The report mentions adopting an open data policy in the entire education sector and using anonymized student-level microdata. According to our data scientists, anonymity should be operationalized further. And actually, it is possible with enough resources to track a learner through non-anonymized data features. But definitely, we agree with the recommendation that we need to be able to have student-level microdata, data that is disaggregated, that is quickly usable by researchers, by organizations, because we need to be able to track how we are doing. on the good practice of having an advanced release calendar, we find that the more pressing need is actually exploring methods of attracting talent to BEA, or the Bureau of Educational Assessment of DepEd, and or upskilling the existing staff of the Bureau. According to a NORAD 2021 report on SDG4 monitoring, many countries do not lack the know-how for the generation and use of educational data. Rather, they lack the core budget to employ additional staff dedicated to work on education data dissemination and use. And we actually looked at this because we have a basic education priority area on assessment. So we looked at the staffing issues of BEA, and actually it is quite palpable that there are gaps in their staffing. You see here, the red blocks show the unfilled positions. Furthermore, in the Philippines, we do not have a lot of undergraduate programs focusing on educational measurement. So even the pipeline is problematic. Apart from that, we feel that targeting teaching and non-teaching staff, and maybe the entire sector, so not just basic education, but the entire education sector, needs to be capacitated on the, not just capacitated, but all of the people in the education sector need to really realize the value of assessment and data literacy. And that is something we don't have yet. On the interoperability, data interoperability, I mentioned already the gaps in terms of personnel, so I won't belabor that point. But for that to happen, we also need to have infrastructure, and that is problematic for a lot of education agencies. And I saw Dr. Toots mention this in the chat, data governance. Having a data governance framework is also key. DepEd receives so much data. So a governance framework saying how it should manage all of that data, how the data should be used, and all of that should actually be developed. But apart from data and data governance, as an important ecosystem, networks of intermediaries or entities seeking to collect, interpret, package, and promote evidence for policymakers is actually also important. To be able to nurture a culture of evidence-based policy, decision-making, and policy-relevant research, we really need to have more of these entities, and that is why PIDS and EDCOM 2 are important. So PIDS, EDCOM 2, we're here in this middle lane. It is not enough that we have the research collected, analyzed in the slow lane. We need to be able to translate that research into policy. And that is why not just EDCOM and PIDS, but actually executive agencies, implementers, they also need to be able to act as intermediaries and use, first of all, evidence to design the interventions, but also use the data to get feedback about those interventions and adjust the interventions accordingly, according to the data that they get. It is only when we have this agile, research-based mindset that we will solve the learning crisis. And maybe I will give an example later on how this can be used, for example, in terms of designing learning camps, making sure that the learners are actually learning in the classrooms. EDCOM 2 is here to remind everyone that it isn't business as usual, and that we are on a mission to build a working Philippine education system. And to do that, we need data, data governance, and a strong culture on using evidence. Thank you very much. And please, if you're interested, please download our Year 1 report. The link is there. Yeah. I will stop sharing here.
Right. Thank you very much, Kay, for that very interesting presentation. We'll hear more from you during the Q&A. So now we move on to our next discussant. He is Director Samuel Sullivan, currently the Director of the Bureau of Curriculum Development under the Department of Education. He spearheads the development and revision of K-12 curriculum framework and learning standards. He actively engages in curriculum policy development and contributes to legislative hearings on education. With a doctorate in science education and extensive experience in teaching, including roles as principal and author of education materials, Dr. Sam is he is a dedicated advocate of STEM education. He has received numerous awards, including national awards and recognition from the U.S. Embassy. Recently elected as chairman of the governing board for the Southeast Asian Ministers of Education Organization Regional Education Center for Science and Mathematics. He continues to mentor graduate students while balancing his family life. Once again, Director Sam, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sir Sonny. I hope I am loud and clear over there, Sir Sonny.
Loud and clear from this end.
Thank you very much. A pleasant day to one and all, to everyone who is joining us here in this charting a path to quality education in the Philippines by 2030 in response to our commitment as one of the UN member states, our commitment to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, particularly on SDG number 4, and that is for the Department of Education. It's really more on the basic education. So we all know that our basic education is enshrined in RA 10533, also known as the Enhanced Basic Education Act of 2013. On the average, K-12 has around 28 million learners. So 28 million learners. That is spread from kinder to grade 12. And we like to thank the PIDS and of course to the sharer about the EDCOM 2 report because these are all substantial inputs so that we can improve the quality of basic education in the Philippines. For we all know that this is a whole nation approach in our basic education, and we believe that with everyone enjoined in this mission of delivering a quality education, will be able to help identify the strengths of what we've been doing in implementing rules and regulations of the K-12 law, and be able to address the challenges that are besetting our quality, the kind of basic education that we have in the Philippines. I only have I request that I may be allowed to just screen share so that I can just articulate some points in response to the presentation of our researchers. Sir Sonny, do you see my slide?
Yes, but please share it full screen. Okay.
Can you see it, Sir Sonny?
We can see it, but probably the format is compromised a bit.
Yeah. Anyway, this is just an alignment of what because this paper was shared to us, and so we tried to just put the different SDG 4 indicators. We have 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, 4.4, 4.5, 4.6. I just added the 4.7, and of course the three others. We have 4A, 4B, and 4C. So it's very clear from the presentation of our researchers. You were able to map out the different indicators as expressed in the SDG 4, which is usually labeled as quality education. And SDG 4 particularly says that has to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. This is the general banner of the SDG 4. So in the presentation of our researchers, we were able to see in the 4.1 the different learning outcomes, the learning outputs and the learning outcomes that include even the gross enrollment rate, the net enrollment rate, if I may add, the cohort survival rate, and even the completion rate. So it was presented very well in response to what are being looked for in the indicators of SDG 4. Likewise, with the discussions on the learning outcomes, particularly on the results of the international large-scale assessments, we have the PISA. Let me start with the by grade level, because we have a TIMSS in 2019. That's for grade 4 science and math. And then the Southeast Asia primary learning metrics, that is in grade 5. And among 15-year-olds, we have generally these learners are in grades 9, but some may be in grade 10. So essentially, PISA is age specific, while SEA PLM and the TIMSS, these are grade specific. But we can infer that in the PISA, generally these are grade 9 learners. So borrowing from those that were shared, for example, in the PISA that was highlighted in the discussion, it's true. This was even acknowledged by no less than our Vice President and Secretary Sara Duterte in her first basic education report on January 30, 2023. So she acknowledged that we really the performance is really dismal in reading literacy, in science literacy, and in math literacy, as measured in the international large-scale assessment, and even in our national achievement test. So if you're going to look at all of this data, for example, there is somewhat a correlation, it's a positive correlation between the results of the NAT and that of the international large-scale assessment. But there are interesting points, there are interesting results, the latest of which after the COVID-19 pandemic is on the result of the PISA. When we compare, for example, our performance in the 2018 PISA and the performance of our learners in the 2022 PISA. While not so high, it can still be further studied in terms of the number of participating countries. But what we are saying is there is a slight increase in the rank of our learners in the PISA, an improvement compared to their performance in the 2018. Sabi ko nga, maliit yun, mababa pa rin, but there is a sign that we can really improve the literacies of our learners. One striking finding, for example, is in the reading literacy. We improve a little in our rank. Even in math, we improve in terms of rank. In science, slightly went down in terms of ranks. But the PISA has a way of expressing also the percent of learners who have attained at least the minimum proficiency level. Because in the PISA, for example, the scores of the learners are put in a level. So level 1, level 2, level 3, 4, 5, and 6. There are actually 6 levels in the PISA. And level 2 in the PISA is considered as the minimum proficiency level. So anything above level 2, we say that at least the minimum proficiency level. And of course, 2018 and 2022, as I've said, mababa pa rin po tayo. But one great strength also of that finding, while it's low, is the proportion of learners which actually went up compared to the 2018. So what I'm saying is during the COVID-19 pandemic, if we can consider those interventions that we did during the COVID-19 pandemic, like for example, the national continuity, the learning continuity plan, somehow made an effective way of improving at least the performance of our learners in the PISA. So that's in terms of the learning outcome. In the learning poverty, yes, our vice president also acknowledged that in the 2023 basic education report. In fact, the learning poverty, which is about 90% who cannot read and understand, okay, at that particular age, a simple text should alert us really, and we have to work as a whole nation in improving the learning outcomes, particularly the reading literacy. Speaking of the literacy in science, math, and reading, if we are going to look at that in the lens of SDG 4.1, if we connect that with what was presented on SDG 4.6 on literacy and numeracy, di po ba napansin po natin, ang taas-taas ng basic literacy rate natin, ang taas-taas din ng functional literacy rate, but the learning outcomes in the SDG 4.1 ay mababa. So it seems that there is something that also we need to reconcile there in our efforts in the implementation of the National Learning Recovery Program. So speaking now of interventions that the department has been doing to address the presentations with the results of the monitoring of the SDG 4.1 until 4.7, and then 4.A, 4.B, 4.C, I think that this can be mapped according to this Matatag Basic Education Agenda, which was a response to the 2023 Basic Education Report of our Vice President. If we listen to her before on her report, her discussions somehow align to what our researchers have presented. The great thing about the presentation here is that they were able to map out which of those indicators, like for example, they saw in the different documents of the Department of Education or data or reports, that they can actually align them as SDG 4.1, 4.2, 4.3. And therefore, after the 2023 Basic Education Report, so ito na po yung intervention that was introduced by our Vice President. And we were able to release a policy, we call it the DepEd Order 13 series of 2023, that is the National Learning Recovery Program. And in that policy, we were able to capture the message, okay, of our secretary to align these four. So we have the make the curriculum relevant to produce job-ready, active, and responsive citizens. And then we have two tasks here. The first task, that's to the right of the take steps to accelerate the delivery of basic education services and provision of facilities. The second would be to take good care of learners by promoting learner well-being, inclusive education, and a positive learning environment. And then for letter G, we have the give support for teachers to teach better. So these are the four quadrants of focus in terms of the national learning recovery. And if we may align the different SDGs in these quadrants, we may somehow say that for can hit practically the SDG 4.1, we have 4.2, even 4.3, 4. And even 4.7, because SDG 4.7 has something to do with the global citizenship education and even education for sustainable development. For the first that is accelerate the delivery of basic education services and provision of facilities, they fall more on the SDG 4.A and 4.B. Whereas for the second take good care of learners by promoting learner well-being, it is here where we can talk about the SDG 4.5, which is on the equitable access to education. And then for letter G, that this gives support for teachers to teach better, has something to do with the SDG 4.C, because it is focused on our teachers. So somehow these four quadrants of the commitments of the Department of Education for the current leadership are being aligned to the commitments or the commitments that the Philippines made, being one of the UN member states, in implementing the targets and indicators of the SDG 4. Let me just let me just provide some more undertakings of the Department of Education in relation to our curriculum. Like for example, there was this one comment from Ma'am Prudencia regarding the partnership between TESDA and DOLE. Ma'am, for this particular MA, okay, which is making the curriculum relevant to produce job-ready, active, and responsible citizens, last August 10, 2023 po, we have launched the Matatag curriculum. So the Matatag curriculum as a nomenclature of our how do you call that, the intended curriculum where we can find there the content standards, performance standards, learning standards, and learning outcomes. So nauna po yung pag-revise natin ng K-10. For this school year po, we are going to review and revise our senior high school. So I'm sure that many of us here are interested to share their insights, their inputs, their proposals on how we are going to leverage the implementation of the senior high school so that our learners will truly be able to choose from the four, how we call them, the curriculum exits, which are higher education, employment, then we have entrepreneurship, and further training for their skills development. And it is true here that Ma'am Prudencia highlighted the importance of partnerships, not just with TESDA, DOLE, but also with the Commission on Higher Education, with the PRC, the Civil Service Commission, because after all, we are saying that we are one nation with this curriculum. So we like to hear from you on how else we can improve our senior high school program. In our senior high school program right now, alam ko po na you are familiar with our academic track, our TVL track, our sports track, and our arts and design track. Generally, 30% of our graduates come from the TVL, and then 70% are from the academic, and then the rest are for arts and design, and of course, sports. Our systematic review of various research are saying na mas marami pa rin talaga ang pumupunta sa kolehiyo after their senior high school graduation. But there are also data that say that after senior high school, they also got employed. Some also have entrepreneurial activities. But what we are saying here now for the senior high school, starting 2024 and onwards, is to further engage the industry partners, the business and industry sectors, because after all, when our TVL learners go into work immersion, we need our industry partners to really consider them for their work immersion, and if possible, even when they will get their particular employment. So yun po yung ano. And then vertically, if you're going to look at the diagonal of the MA with the G, we say that the quality of a system, the quality of an education system does not exceed the quality of teachers. So may nasabi po dito kanina si Sir Melvin tungkol sa salary of our teachers. Of course, sir, we recognize your concern regarding the salary of teachers. Although we also say that there are non-monetary support that we can provide our teachers, like for example, yung nabanggit po kanina, na meron na po tayong tinatawag na uninterrupted 1-month vacation of teachers, and that will run from June 1 to June 30 of 2024. So meron na po tayong DepEd Order 3 series of 2024 na sinasabi niya itong mga teachers natin, they have to how do you call that? They have to enjoy also a 1 month uninterrupted break. And in that DepEd order, it is also saying that our teachers can start accepting only some voluntary works like the National Learning Camp beginning July 1 of 2024, because our new school year will begin on July 29, 2024. So there is a slight backward to our opening of school year 2024-2025. Likewise po, there was this DepEd order on the removal of administrative tasks of our teachers. And thanks to DepEd, thanks to all agencies that took part, okay, in this endeavor to remove the administrative tasks of our teachers. Which means that these are administrative tasks that do not have direct relevance to the teaching and learning process, because there are also tasks, maybe we can call them the ancillary tasks, that directly support teaching and learning. So there will be a separate policy later on that will be released along that line. But that is a good news na nawalan na po ng administrative task yung ating mga teachers. So itong diagonal na ito, yung Ma at saka G, ito po kasi yung dalawang mahalagang commitments ng ating Department of Education. Tapos yung other diagonal, yung dalawang ta po dyan, yung unang ta is making sure that our learners are in safe learning spaces, that they are provided the necessary services that will improve their ability to learn. Like for example, meron po tayong mga health services, we have the school-based feeding program, and then here in the second ta, this also particularly addresses one important finding of PISA. Alam niyo po ba na ang mga learners natin sa Pilipinas, nireport po nila sa PISA na marami po sa kanila ang, how do you call that, nakaranas ng bullying. That's why there's a need for us to strengthen our child protection and child safeguarding policy implementation. So here also we promote the implementation of programs and projects that address the uniqueness, the individuality of our learners. Kasi yun yung sinabi ni Sir Yuri kanina about the student services. Sir, they are being addressed here. Lastly po, let me just mention when I said the National Learning Recovery Program, nabanggit ko na po kanina yung National Learning Camp. That is one of the components. Alam niyo po ba na ang National Learning Camp, let's just say that this is the first time that it was done nationwide, because here we identified volunteer teachers and even volunteer learners who like to improve further their skills along science, math, and reading. So that was our first implementation was, of course, in the beginning of school year 2023-2024. And there will be another National Learning Camp for the second time around by starting the first 2 weeks of July 2024. Aside from the National Learning Camp, there's also the National Reading Program. Nabanggit po ito ni Sir Jomel. He mentioned about the Brigada Pagbasa. That's great, sir. And this one is in support to our National Reading Program. So we are going to improve further in response to the challenges as provided by our researchers in the EDCOM 2 report, that there's a really need for us to improve the reading literacy of our learners. So that's why we have the National reading program. And I'm sure that you are also aware of our DepEd Memo 1 about the catch-up Fridays. We're in the Friday, we have the first half of the period of the first half of the day dedicated to drop everything and read. So of course, that is our maiden implementation of the Catch-up Friday for reading, and that includes values education, even health and peace education. And of course, in reading, we don't only talk about reading in English, but also reading in Filipino. Just like what Sir Jomil said, how about Filipino? Yes, sir, there is also a national achievement test in Filipino, and it seems that among the 5 learning areas tested in the national achievement test, it is in Filipino where we say it is also considered high. But maybe we need to further disaggregate that. And lastly po, just to address one concern of Sir Joseph regarding foreign language. Yes, sir, I agree with you. The importance now of promoting foreign language aside from English, Filipino, but also foreign language. Right now, sir, we have what we call the special program in foreign language. But right now, what is available for us is the special program in foreign language. We have French, Spanish. We also have German, Korean. Bali, 6 po yung ating foreign language right now. But you are right, sir. It's also nice that we offer this even in the lower grades. So in closing po, this is how we are looking at the presentation of our researchers. It is the NLRP which captured the 4 quadrants of commitments of the Department of Education. And we understand that all of you who are here virtually right now, dumaan po tayo lahat sa basic education. And of course, let us all join our hands together in response to the challenge of the whole nation approach in building the capabilities of our learners. Because after all, when we do that, they will be in the best disposition to take our respective places later on as we continue to age and until we retire. And they will be the ones to take over what we have left as positions or mission. So with that, thank you very much for this opportunity to share. And by the way, the planning service team is also here. We'd like also to share that right now it is under finalizing its report also on the mapping of the SDG 4 indicators to what is happening in the Department of Education, considering all the data that you have provided. And I agree po sa inyo, mahalaga po yung data governance. While we have the EBEIS and the LIS, we are also in talks with the Department of Labor and Employment because last time they mentioned about their LMIS, the Labor Market Information System. So marami po tayong gagawin and sana po sama-sama po tayo na tulungan para sa maunlad na bagong Pilipinas. Maraming salamat po.
Okay, thank you very much, Director Sam. At this point, may we request our presenters and discussants to open your respective web cameras. I guess it's worth stressing from the author's presentation that although there are admin duties given to our teachers, they are not really underpaid. So I think that was a big highlight in one of those presentations. Before we go into the actual questions submitted to us, may we ask the authors to give their responses, the manifestations of our discussants. May we start with Dr. Toots. Toots, please, your comments.
Well, I'm thankful for both our discussants giving their views, and particularly to Kay, pointing specific issues about this admin duties, no? Because imagine we had this paper from 5 years ago, and it took DepEd 5 years to sit with you and finally resolve or start working on a plan to resolve it. I mean, this is the thing that I find a little bit difficult. Sometimes I wonder how many people read the things that I write or because sometimes I keep saying that the data is very clear. All you need to do is look at it and it tells already a story, but then we don't listen. But anyways, I'm glad that somehow there are now efforts to listen more attentively, because it's going to be important to recognize that somebody was asking what really has been the problem. Why are we where we are? Well, I would always say that we are where we are because of our past mistakes. It's been accumulated. I couldn't that pinpoint and say just this current administration or the past one had problems with quality education. It's been there for decades. It's only now that all of this data is really surfacing and looking straight at us and telling us that quality education is still far from a reality. And I'm glad that there are efforts to improve the curriculum. However, they're not going to be enough, because in a way, for me, the bottom line for reaching quality is to make sure that the kids at a very young age, they're learning how to read. Because for me, I mean, even PISA, for that matter, when you look at the PISA, I disagree with our DepEd colleague that there was an improvement. Statistically, there was no improvement. It was just ranks, but even ranks, you have to be very careful. When you're looking at changes, the changes were not statistically significant. So anyways, that said, the point here is that why are we where we are? Because the kids are not reading. And then most of the time, we take the easy path to just let them go to the next level, make them graduate even without even having the basic skills. So everything's about foundational skills, making sure that they're there, so everything starts at basic education. Everything starts at learning, making sure that our kids are learning how to read. Thank you.
Excellent response. May we ask Jason? Jason, please, for your response.
Yes, I'd like to connect with sa sinabi ni Dr. Toots about the reading skills of our learners. No, so if we're going to analyze the data further and look at the extent how reading ability of students are correlated with, for example, with mathematics and science test scores, we could really find a strong connection that poor readers tend to perform worse as compared to those who are reading for pleasure, for example. So I think one thing that we could take a look at is there are other self-reported characteristics. For example, yung mga students who have dropped out. No? So aside from just thinking of interventions at the present, there are students who are being dropping out of the system, and we do not have an idea of what's happening when they drop out. And when they come back, say 1 or 2 years later, they have missed a great opportunity for them to learn. So if we're going to take a look at the PISA data, I think 2018 and 2021 data sets, basically they show high dropout rates, particularly for those students who are enrolled in the public school systems. So I think we need to leverage yung ating how, let's say, we trace our learners throughout the basic education cycle. And in a way, we cannot just think of, let's say, thinking of mga Band-Aid policies teaching them how to read better, how to enjoy reading, if we don't address the fundamental gaps or cracks in their education cycle. So some of them are behind. So the chances of them dropping out later in the future, or for them getting delayed in their education cycles, are far much higher for those who had experienced setbacks. So it goes beyond. So we need to, in particular, our policies, I think, for me, it's like we need to address those in the earlier years, because the marginal benefit of investments in early childhood education, for example, in the basic education, is much higher than, let's say, for example, the secondary education. I'm not saying that we should invest less. What I'm saying is that the long run benefits, economically speaking, the returns on education are far higher if we concentrate them for ECCD, for grades 1, 2, 3, 4, where there's higher potential that the students will drop out because of a wide variety of reasons. So in that way, I think we will be able to address a part of the reason why some of our students are underperforming in mathematics and science. So a lot of it has to go foundationally. Even before going to school, it's important that we know where the students are. So the basic education cycle, when I was talking to some colleagues, some parents, for example, in Singapore already have a school in mind where they would enlist their student if the student gets to reach a 3.5 year, let's say, preschool. So I think we should start thinking, right the moment, when pregnancy starts. So as to address these kinds of problems.
Thanks, Jason. Love, can we have your response?
Yeah, let me just thanks, Sonny. I just want to thank Kay and Director Sam for your comments. Actually, I want to highlight what Kay mentioned about the different coordinating agencies that we have in the system, and this speaks to the governance of our education system. So I think we need to be, I guess, reminded that education is cumulative and interconnected. Here in our presentation today, and because we are working on this research, there were three of us, right? Dr. Toots talking about basic ed, me, TVET, Jason, higher ed. And it might seem like it's siloed, but we really shouldn't look at it that way. What Jason said about really investing early on in early education, that's very important because that gets accumulated as a person or as a Filipino learner goes through the education system. The many of the problems that we have now, and to Dr. Toots' point about where we are now is because of the mistakes we've made in the past. It's really about the lack of coordination, and it's almost like herding cats, right? When it comes to governing the education system in the Philippines, there are so many moving parts with many of these different programs that actually don't even get evaluated, or if they do get evaluated, we don't know where the data on the evaluation are. And so going back to my point, it would be important to really look at the system as a system, making sure that all of the moving parts are in lockstep, and maybe, yes, to eliminate some of these coordinating agencies that don't make sense and really focus on the ones that actually matter. In one policy note that I wrote for PIBED, I identified 3 coordinating agencies that are important. The Teacher Education Council, because it coordinates DepEd, CHED, PRC, and TESDA on teacher professional development, both in service and pre-service. Well, I should have started with the ECCD Council because that's the first part. ECCD Council is also very, very important. It coordinates DepEd, LGU, DSWD. There are so many actors there. And then finally, the Unifast board. That's another coordinating council that actually then looks at the latter part of the education pipeline. And so again, looking at the education governance system as a system, education as cumulative, and therefore we need to make sure that our interventions are also oriented towards those principles, so that we make sure that we do provide equitable, good quality education for all learners.
Okay, very good. I'll go now to the first question. One big question from my end. I think you highlighted how complex it is in terms of what we have education-wise, and also in terms of education-related outcomes. What's simple is the evidence that we have in terms of the labor force. You've been saying that we have more younger people entering the labor force, but dissecting the labor force, you'll see a lot of flaggable concerns. The workers with incomplete high school diplomas dominate. Workers with incomplete college degrees are the same in number. as those who have graduated from college. And there are more senior high school students entering the labor force, the same as the non-completers. So I think these are numbers of major concern. What do they say in terms of our educational system, in terms of what we can do to further augment the system that we have? Who wants to answer first? Toots.
Yeah, sige,
Yes.
maybe let me start off, but I guess Jason already gave the a little bit of the storyline here that essentially we have a labor market that's really below the skills that we would like. And the problem is many, as Jason said, are actually not even finishing secondary education. And then those that do, they would get into jobs that are not the kinds of jobs that we would expect them to get. So it's kind of clear to me that and then the question first is, why do the big bulk not finish their secondary education? So years ago we already pointed out that in the surveys of the PSA, they always say that the main reason why kids are not in school is because of lack of interest. And when you start unpacking that term, we did that with Clarissa David years ago, and we managed to identify that lack of interest can be traced to poor grades being traced to lack of reading skills. That's all. So in a way, again, this is all tied up. You cannot expect people to get into college. We want to keep pushing for everybody to get into college. That won't happen until we make sure that our kids are learning how to read. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, I think from EDCOM, can we hear from Kay? Kay, please, your response to that
Yes,
earlier
yeah.
question.
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Toots, and I just wanted to add that one of the things that we want to look into is the implementation of SHS. So DepEd is already reviewing the implementation of SHS, but it will only be able to finish, I think, the curriculum review by next year. But I think that's an important piece that we need to take into account. Again, we want to look at the data, the evidence, before we can suggest solutions. So I don't want to say anything else apart from that, but that it's important to look at what DepEd is, the results of the DepEd review, yeah, in terms of SHS. But yes, I definitely agree that, and that's one of the things I wrote in the chat box, that functional literacy, numeracy, that's really the most important thing. And that's what we need to address now. And we need to be more radical in addressing that. And I think that's where data again and research evidence, that's where those things need to be factored in. So we've been asking DepEd a lot about, monitoring the learning camps, catch-up Fridays, all of that. And we have a meeting scheduled in April to check what the results of what the impact is of all of these interventions, because we want to make sure that all of these interventions actually are helping the learners, actually lead to better reading and numeracy related outcomes. But we don't know that. So it's very difficult to talk about employment outcomes when your learners cannot even, comprehend complex sentences. Yeah. And we have seen that in the classroom. We have visited a few classrooms, and even secondary school students sometimes struggle with reading comprehension.
And as Jason mentioned earlier, reading really relates very much as well to skills in math and science. So very telling in terms of that indicator. Can we have Director Sam for the institutional response from DepEd?
Yes, sir. I agree with those insights that to be truly successful, we really have to work together and listen to all of these out results of evidence-based research, just like what we got from PIDS. In fact, PIDS has provided us already a good number of research, and like what Ms. K said, if we like to be successful in the senior high school implementation as we roll out the Matatag curriculum, then it matters a lot to really engage all our stakeholders. So just like what I said a while ago, yes, the timeline for the senior high school review is this year, and as expressed by Vice President in her various media message, that we have to hopefully we can pilot implement this by the third or fourth quarter of 2025. So and then right now, hopefully by May, we'll be able also to consolidate all of this evidence, because we will be using this in the finalization of the review results as inputs to the revision of our senior high school. So we will surely engage you along the revision process. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks as well for those responses. The next question is related to resources. You've said that DepEd actually tripled its budget over the past decade. But still, it's flaggable because compared to what we have globally, we are still very low in terms of educational investments. So the attached questions to that would be, number one, is it okay for us to allow 100% infusion of investment coming from foreign entities, pouring into higher education in the country? The second is, we're going to further augment funding for primary and secondary education in the country. Where else should we put the extra amount? Because we've been putting a lot in our educational system. And earlier, we've had our ranking in terms of supposed importance or priorities. But asking you guys, where should we put additional money when it comes to primary, secondary, and possibly higher education in the country? May I start with Love? Love, please.
Thanks, Sonny. Yeah, just in terms of funding, it is worrying that we are really not investing enough in education publicly. Actually, I think it's in our culture that families do spend money in education there. I just don't remember the exact figures now, but there's a significant amount of private investment in education. But just specific to public investment, and I think Dr. Toots showed that chart in the PISA. Actually, there's a threshold. It's about 75,000 per capita cumulative spending in basic education that then could explain about 20% variation in the scores in the PISA. Just for reference, we're only at about $11,000 PPP. So we're really very below that threshold. So in terms of actual, like, how much should we further spend? I think we can tie that towards our targets in terms of the PISA results that we want. So if it explains about 20% of percentage points in variation, then maybe we can, incrementally increase our budget accordingly. So this is, I guess, for Director Sam and the DepEd to identify, okay, what is our target, and then work towards that level of investment given the data that we have. Secondly, in terms of where to invest, given that we also have very tight fiscal space, right? There are competing competing priorities. And we actually saw this during COVID. During a health crisis, understandably, most of the money went to health responses. So given that tight fiscal space, I would say that actually we can invest more, or making sure that we invest properly and we spend the money properly. For example, for capital outlay for 2022, we were only really able to, about of the 28 billion pesos allocated for classroom construction, we were only able to spend 7 billion. So, the allocation is one thing, how we spend it, and if even we're spending fast enough is another issue. So we need to be able to actually spend what we have. And actually, just to close off on this point, I would actually encourage more local governments to spend more of their special education fund. So local budgets only account for 5% of education spending in the country. This could be more because LGUs only, I think based on DOF data, they've only historically spent about 60% of their special education fund. And this is in the billions. With the Mandanas ruling, LGUs will have even more money. And so that could be another source of funding for education, and actually making sure that LGUs are empowered, they have the capacity also to spend, and held accountable for the education outcomes of their locality could be one. And I guess plug for decentralization and devolution of education governance is my answer to your question, Sonny.
Okay, very
Thank
good,
you.
Love. Jason, please.
Right. I'd like to support yung sinabi ni Love earlier about the equity and efficiency of spending in the Philippines. So there was a study a couple of years back on the equity dimensions of public spending in education. If we're going to look at the national government spending on education, particularly how much DepEd spends, based on it's largely 95% would be national government spending. So if we're going to look at the equity, hindi nagkakalayo across regions. Of course, we expect that there are differences between secondary education and elementary education, but a source of inequity is a special education fund that some of the highly urbanized cities actually spend like even 10 times as much as the poorest municipalities in the Philippines. No? And the object of expenditure actually differs as well. The special education fund, before pwede pang may teacher hiring, ngayon hindi na. So most of them would be focused on specific items, which it becomes a political tool for some of the local governments. So I think we should kaya importante ito sa Mandanas ruling, no? So in the event that a lot of the decision making happens to be devolved to the local level, so the local executive should be informed on what specific tools or let's say policy levers can be used to improve education outcomes at the local level. So obviously, I think there's the big issue of do we need to spend more? Definitely, yes. As a developing country, if we compare ourselves to Vietnam, for example, they spend significantly much higher than us on basic education spending. And the bulk of our spending actually goes to personal services. And yung MOE, of course, if you talk up to principals, if you look at the previous reports, anecdotal evidences, nung tumaas yung kuryente, they don't know how to fund, let's say, the remaining 2 months or 3 months. So they would have to raise funds just to pay for electricity. And these are the things that principals should not be thinking about. They should be thinking of ways on how to help the learners advance, not thinking about how to pay for the water, or they have to organize a pageant just to do that. So these are the things that not directly related to learning outcomes. No, so we need to have inclusive learning environments oriented to the well-being and the future of our students, not thinking about the bills. These are the problems of our adults. So just one. So in a way, I think what is missing is when we devolve, for example, the responsibilities, we also think about devolving accountabilities at the same time. Local executives should care as much with the test scores, and the parents, stakeholders should see how are our schools, for example, performing vis-a-vis with other schools in their area. We're not creating, let's say, some sort of competition, but I think it's some sort of a transparency. If we look at it on a transparency perspective, that schools are responsible for reporting how they're performing. And so they would have a more conscious effort, a natural effort to say, hi parents, ito po yung ating status natin, this is our ways we can improve. And they can think of ways on how to address these gaps. So I think that's how we connect, although it's a bit vague how I said it, but we can see how our expenditures flow from the national government up to the local levels. But we should also think of how accountability and responsibility should work or should be operationalized at the community levels.
Thank you, Jason. Toots?
Yeah, well, there's so many things, if you look at the entire sector, you really wonder, where do we start? Because it seems like there are too many, it's a myriad of problems, but the only thing is we know that certainly spending matters, we're underspending. And to one of your questions that you raised, Sonny, was, would it matter if we internationalize higher education by allowing for foreign schools to own some schools here? And the answer is, well, of course, it depends on what kind of schools come in. If you have the good schools coming in, that would be good. But if you have the not so good schools coming in, then that will be a problem. So you need to also put you encourage liberalization, but at the same time put some ways of regulating, because otherwise, any changes, for that matter, change is good if you know how you plan it very well, but otherwise there might be unintended consequences, no? So but again, going back to spending, I mean, we've been already talking so much about the need for better spending when much of the budget of DepEd really goes to the salaries of teachers, no? And there are 1 million in the workforce. Can you imagine? And when each teacher wants to have more salaries, then can you imagine where will we get the money, especially given all these competing issues? Should we spend more on education, social protection? Should we spend on investments? It's on infrastructure. So, but the thing is, like, I guess one of the things that Jason brilliantly pointed out is the issue of accountability. Right now, we have never really held any of our leaders accountable for where we are now in the education sector. It's always easy for us to just just say, oh, we are this, etc. But then, obviously, as I said, we are in this crisis because of our past mistakes. And so the question is, okay, even if we don't hold people accountable, what can we do next? No, so we really need there's much hope that the EDCOM 2 will deliver. No, some people wonder whether it will, but let's see. No, I mean, we're giving you the remaining lifetime that you have, but after that, the question is results. No? Whether or not, with whatever investments that they're going to make in whatever front, whether they will really yield the desired results. But for me, I mean, really everything starts with something simple, basic foundational literacy skills. If you're going to do a little bit more about the world being much more digital, clearly we're not preparing people, because all our young are just they know how to like and share, but they don't even read what they share on Facebook. It's oh gosh, we're in such a mess. So anyways, we need to take this much more seriously than when we have been doing in the past. And I hope this should be a wake-up call, maybe for us even to select better leaders. Thank you.
Yeah, speaking of EDCOM, I think Kay earlier flagged the issues about accountability, data and knowledge governance, those being key in looking at everything. We actually have so many questions that we can ask. And I think our authors and discussants have been very good in terms of answering the online questions. And unfortunately, we don't have that much time remaining. So probably one last question relating to one big issue about our educational system, and this relates to our teachers. A question by one of our participants online mentioned the loss of brain power within the educational system. That includes teachers migrating to better pastures abroad. You also flagged the need for our current crop of teachers to be better trained, better built capacity-wise, and also for entering ones to better go through proper recruitment processes. Are these enough for us to ensure that our learners in the future, our current and future learners, are in good hands? That's one big question. Who wants to answer? Director Sam? Probably on the part of DepEd, looking at our main workers within the educational systems are our teachers and educators.
Yeah, of course, we recognize that there are really teachers finding opportunities abroad, and probably one way to be able to keep them. Okay, as I've said, there are already two policies that are in place, because we are also keen to the fact that many have been claiming about the challenges that they are meeting. They say that they have more time. They don't have much time teaching the learners in the classroom, and therefore, and that was due to the fact that there are many administrative tasks assigned to them. So we like to see in the future the effect of this policy. Likewise, to also give them time to rest and really to be able to stay with their families, their loved ones, because after all, that will contribute to their well-being, to their wellness. And yes, nabanggit ko naman po kanina, although sabi natin is a motherhood statement na the quality really of our education depends a lot on the quality of our teachers, not just in basic education, but also in higher education and even in technical education and skills development. So as I've said, we have to see the effects of these policies, because we like to see how these policies are implemented. Kaya tama po yung sinasabi ninyo po na napakahalaga ng mga evidence-based na monitoring and evaluation. Hoping that these interventions will at least reduce the number of teachers who will, for example, think of going somewhere else, say abroad, to find other jobs. Thank you.
Thank you. We have very little time remaining, but Jason and Love actually raised their hands. So very quick responses, Jason and Love. Jason, please.
Well, just a quick response. I think there's one of the things that we haven't really addressed now. Before even teachers think of moving abroad, we are actually losing our teachers to other sectors as well. Some of them are leaving the teaching profession towards other jobs, which are not related to teaching at all. So if we're going to check, so if let's say, for example, DepEds or any other policy work related to DepEd, if we're going to look at the labor force survey, where are those Bachelor of Education degree holders going to? In fact, the data will show you there are far more education degree holders outside of the education system than it is who are actually working in the education system. And this is really worrying. And the trend is that most of them probably stay few years for, let's say, we're checking on the data on that. They stay on the education system, then they drop out, they move to other more gainful employment. So, but we're also seeing patterns. They go to other more productive jobs, but they're also going to jobs where they have a tendency to be underemployed. Some of them became maids, drivers, and they go in, they have college degrees, but these are not the most productive for them. So I think we should also address that. So, and also some other professions who might be interested to go into teaching, there could be other pathways for them to be really accredited as teachers eventually. I think Silhab would also be able to say something.
Thanks, Jason.
No, yeah,
Love, please.
actually, it ties very neatly to what I wanted to say, because in our experience in PIBED, when we were running a scholarship program to attract young people into the teaching profession, the feedback that we got was actually that they didn't want to consider teaching because there was no progression in their careers, right? And if you look at the makeup of the teachers and what their levels are within the department, majority of them are teacher one. So if it's and especially for young people now, or not just young people but anyone really, if you think it's a dead end job, you're not gonna stay. So apart from the workload, we also need to look at career progression of our teachers, because that's a big incentive for them to stay. If they know that there's a future for them, that they're being invested in, and they can really make something out of their profession and vocation for themselves and for their families.
All right.
Can I add one last thing?
Yes, Kay. One final response before we go to the closing manifestations from you guys. Okay, please.
Yes. Apart from teacher welfare and career progression, I think a big thing that we also need to provide teachers is really the support. Learning materials, instructional supervision. Yung mga teachers that we consulted in our many meetings, consultations, they always say they want to teach, pero they need that support. So I think we just need to provide that enabling environment, that's the support that they specifically ask for, and then mas magiging masaya sila at magiging mas maganda yung pagtuturo sa classroom. Thank you.
Excellent responses. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for our exchanges. But before we end, may we ask our panelists to make your final manifestations. May we start with Sam? Sam, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, PIDS, and of course to our researchers. This kind of engagement allows us also to learn further and learn from the lessons from your research findings. A good number of recommendations. I was able to capture them, and they all contribute to how we are going to go through the process of our implementation of our curriculum. So maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat. Patuloy po natin na pagtulungan na iangat ang kalidad ng edukasyon sa ating bansa. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Director Sam. May we ask Love for your final remarks?
I just want to thank this opportunity that PIDS gave me to do research on education, something that I am very passionate about. It was a joy working with Dr. Toots and Jason on this. We can't highlight enough the importance of evidence for policy making. We, as they say, right, we cannot manage what we cannot measure. And so we need this information, we need data to really make sure that we are moving in the right direction and we have the right intervention. So again, thank you. Thank you also to the discussants for your insights. And yeah, I wish everyone a very good day ahead.
Thank you, Love. Kay, please.
I appreciate the focus on data governance, and use of evidence. And thank you for PIDS kasi nagkaroon ng focus sa mga areas na ito na hindi parating na bibigyan ng pansin. And I would like to invite everyone, organizations, researchers, to approach EDCOM 2. We are conducting 90+ research studies with partners. And so again, to highlight the importance of data and evidence, if you have research, if you want to partner with us, please do so. Maraming salamat, and we really have to work together to be able to move towards quality education.
Thank you, Kay. Jason, for your final words.
Right. Actually, I don't have really final words. No, I'm also just like probably para sa mga teacher dito. One of the reasons why we went to teaching is because we love to teach. We love working with learners. So I think we should go back to that reason why we wanted to go to teaching in the first place. And I think it's important that some of the key lessons that we emphasize here, that we should invest substantially in public investments in education, are quite critical. So beyond that as well, so I think there's a lot more research that needs to be done, a lot more collaboration among agencies, and I think you should be open-minded to work together rather than keeping, let's say, for example, data from one another. So I think it's quite important for us to work effectively.
Thank you, Jason. And finally, our principal investigator, Dr. Toots Albert.
Well, as we think of a chart towards our pathway towards quality education, the whole point is really trying to make sure that we have a better learning environment. And learning environment, there are many things that matter. Resources matter. Teachers also matter. They matter a lot. When you think when you think of myself, I am where I am because of the teachers that I've had in the past. Students matter, the learners. They are the ones that matter the most, perhaps. We get passionate. We're all many of us are here are teachers, and you know, as students, unfortunately, they also have their problems. Many of them are when they come to class, they're hungry. You know, we haven't even touched. You just focus on SDG 4, but they're related to other SDGs too. Because how can you expect any kid to learn in a school when he has not even eaten the entire day? You know, so these are things that we need to be serious about, and part of the seriousness is making sure that we work together towards charting our future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Excellent panel members, excellent and very active participants from both Zoom and Facebook. Let us give everyone a big round of applause. So before we officially close the program, let me announce the raffle winners. For those joining our event for the first time, PIDS selects 2 winners from Zoom and 1 winner from Facebook as a token of gratitude to our attendees. So without further ado, our winners for today from Zoom, we have Adrian John Tuncido from Bukidnon State University. We also have Marilyn Dangilan from Vicente L. Dangilan Memorial Clinic. And from Facebook, we have Chris Jezreel Parleta from Laguna State Polytechnic University. Congratulations to all our winners. The PIDS Tech team will coordinate with you on how to claim your respective prizes. So again, thank you very much to our panelists, our presenters, our discussants for spending the morning with us. Excellent presentations and comments and insights. So once again, we appreciate your attendance today. The speakers' presentations will be available on the PIDS website, presented in your screen. Meanwhile, you may download a copy of the study from the link provided in the chat box for Zoom participants and comment section for our Facebook attendees. So to further close, please help us improve our webinars. Kindly answer our feedback form through the link flashed on your screens and provided in the chat box. For those watching us via Facebook Live, the link is shared in the comment box as well. Please note that the e-certificate of participation will be sent to your email automatically following the submission of the feedback form. So accomplish the feedback forms to get your respective certificates. Your feedback and recommendations are going to be very helpful to PIDS to make us work even harder and produce even better webinars in the near future. Keep in touch And you may follow PIDS on our different digital platforms indicated in the screen, www.pids.gov.ph for our website, and our Facebook and X platforms as well. So finally, we'd like to extend our gratitude to the various organizations from the government, the academe, civil service organizations, and other international organizations and private sectors for joining us today. We hope you've gained valuable insights from the presentations and the insights from the question and answer exchanges that we've had earlier. As we have seen, ensuring access to education for all requires a multifaceted approach. However, the journey starts within all of us. Let us work together to ensure everyone has the opportunity to learn, grow, and thrive. Thank you again, everyone. Magandang umaga po sa lahat. Mag-ingat po kayo. Goodbye and have a pleasant day ahead.